What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and we are into draft season. Today I got a mock draft reaction. I'm going to grade the mock draft for you. Coming from Mike Renner. I know not everybody's crazy about PFF, but really, if you're a big fan of draft season, want to become a draft analyst, pundit, whatever, Mike Renner is just one of those guys I think you have to follow and listen to his insight. He's really ahead of the curve on a lot of prospects. I really do put him in that Daniel Jeremiah type of camp. Todd McShay, Mel Kiper, plenty of other names I think can be thrown in that mix, but he's one of the best in the biz. He put out a mock draft, so let's go ahead and react to it. So, kick things off, and I'm interested to see, does he have a trade at 1? He does indeed. And a lot of my mock drafts are going to have trades moving on because I don't think the Chicago Bears are going to draft Bryce Young. They could and then trade Fields, but ultimately I think it's going to play out as they trade the number 1 overall pick. And here he's got Indianapolis. If it's up to me, I think Carolina's the most likely team. Washington's a sleeper because, hey, you're going to have a new owner here not too soon or not too long in the future. And I think Dave Tepper or whoever that Washington manager or new owner is going to be, they're going to want to make a big splash. But Indianapolis totally makes sense. Chris Ballard's been dealt a pretty rough card because that roster really was constructed with Andrew Luck right at the center of it. He retires earlier, and ever since there's been a massive, just kind of a vacuum in the center of that roster and how it's been constructed. So we start with the Colts moving up to pick number 1 and selecting Bryce Young. I think whoever moves up to 1, Bryce Young's going to be the pick. So don't hate that whatsoever, and the Colts certainly make a ton of sense. I don't really care about the draft compensation because for the sake of this 1-round mock draft, it's a pick swap, and the rest of it can be sorted out elsewhere. So don't hate that whatsoever. And you look at this Colts team, I mean, the offensive line, ideally is a little bit better than what we maybe saw at points of the season, but let's just call that unit solid, okay, dependable. And then Bryce Young's got, wide receiver 1 and Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, who looked okay. The defense has big pieces there. It just comes down to who that head coach is going to be, right? So that would be a really fun landing spot for Bryce Young. Number 2 pick, Will Levis. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is the type of situation you have to try to work yourself out of if you're Houston. Obviously, you fire Lovie Smith. Feels like part of that might be some rough animosity because of losing the number 1 overall pick. I've also heard rumblings that Nick Caserio might be gone too, which that's crazy because the guy really hasn't had the chance to start the rebuild considering Deshaun Watson just got traded last year. So I think he'll stay, but man, that would be crazy. But Will Levis here at number 2, I don't think that's a bad secondary option if the Texans can't move up to 1 and get Bryce Young. It really does make you wish that they just lost the Colts and solidified the number 1 overall pick because Bryce Young, Houston, that just felt like the right fit for both components of that. But hey, Will Levis, ton of tools. Bigger arm than Bryce Young, more mobility. Obviously, not nearly the accuracy or high leverage game, tape. And Bryce Young's just got that it factor. We've seen him do it in such big games before and keep Bama in games at times this year, like the Tennessee one that always comes to mind for me. Levis, not quite so much, right? Now, granted, I think his supporting cast, even in a down year for Bama, Kentucky ain't nowhere close to a down Alabama year roster-wise. So, yeah, wow. And if Levis goes 2 here, I think you're going to naturally, very different body types, but that risk-reward proposition going number 2, you're going to hear a whole lot of Zach Wilson, type of situation comparisons, I think. So if this is the route, I will be fascinated to see how it plays out. But yeah, I mean, Houston's got to be already on the phone with Chicago trying to move up to 1, right? I don't know. But if not, Levis at 2 makes sense to me. Then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. Will Anderson Jr., I mean, potentially the best non-quarterback in this draft class. Makes a ton of sense for me. They have no edge rushers. They have no interior rushers. They need something, whether it's Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, that picks an A. And that takes the Chicago Bears. I mean, how big of a winner would this be? As, all my mocks leading up to this, I've been having, them take Jalen Carter at 2. Now they have the number 1 overall pick. They trade down from 1 to 4, get a haul, and still get the guy who I think is the absolute best case situation for them to draft. Jalen Carter, that 3-tech that Matty Eberflus covets and needs in the middle of that defense, and plus it's just a huge area of need. And to me, he's the best non-quarterback in this draft class, but him and Anderson, you really can't go wrong. It's 1A, 1B. So would love this situation for the Bears. You're just basically getting more assets to get the same guy I think ultimately should be the pick for them. So, wow, what a win that would be for Chicago. Next up, Seattle Seahawks. Myles Murphy. Really like this fit. Guy with inside-out versatility. Kind of has that Trayvon Trayvon Walker build at 6'5", 275. He's going to put up insane numbers at Indianapolis. Not the craziest production, but with Seattle, I think he can kind of buy some time. They have Uchenna Nwosu still there. They have Boye Mafe going into year 2. Like he can bide some time. What I'm starting to really love the idea for Seattle. Now it's tough because you're going to potentially miss out on a corner if you do this, and I still like them potentially adding a corner in the first round. But if they go like a Miles Murphy, a Tyree Wilson here, and then Siaki Ika, thinking about doing that for one of my future mock drafts. Could they get him at that 20 pick, whatever that second first rounder is? That could be really spicy, and it could really change that entire complexion of the defensive line for the future. Like a Miles Murphy and a Siaki Ika, good luck running against the Seattle Seahawks. But I still really like them adding a Keely Ringo, a Christian Gonzalez, one of those long, lanky corners to pair up with Tariq Woolen. Really, there's no going wrong in this draft class for Seattle, especially considering how many picks they have. But Miles Murphy here at 5, I think makes a ton of sense. Detroit Lions, Brian Brzee, I think another really solid selection that would make a ton of sense. Lee McNeil then plays the nose tackle spot full time. Yeah, checks a lot of boxes, adds some more pass rush, and doing it from the interior. Highly touted recruit, great athletic profile, a guy I think totally should go in the top 10. Okay, moving on now, let's take a look at the Las Vegas Raiders taking C.J. Stroud. And yeah, man, after how well Stroud played in the college football semis, to me, he's definitely a lock for the top 10 now. And, the top 8 is going to be tough to get away from. Yeah, and for Vegas, like the situation is where Mike Davis is going to come to the office and he's going to be like, all right, you want to move on from Carr. What you got that's better? And I think the easiest way you could potentially sell that is, hey, we're going to draft one of these rookies at the top of the draft board. Get somebody who's young, high ceiling, somebody with a higher ceiling than a Derek Carr, but also cheap. So where the cap savings go from Carr to, let's say in this case, a CJ Stroud, we can pour that money into defense and give Patrick Graham, our DC, an actual honest chance. We're going to get some corners, we're going to get some interior defensive makers or playmakers. Yeah, I think that's kind of the easiest sell for why you would move on from Derek Carr. So step 1 of that would be, using that money in free agency. And then step 2 would be who's that quarterback to replace him. CJ Stroud, again, looked really, really good against Georgia in that college football playoff. Really knocked away a lot of the criticisms I've had against him. Struggling against pressure, struggling off script. He kind of put a lot of that by the wayside. That's just one game, but that one game is the game to point to if you're a CJ Stroud fan or a believer. So would love this situation. And for Josh McDaniels, another part of that sell is like, hey, this guy's great when the situation's pristine. Let me take care of that. And Josh McDaniels might not be a good head coach, but he has always had success as an offensive mind, right? Without Tom Brady, like look at Mac Jones this year versus last year. Now, part of that, Matt Patricia was, not an offensive coordinator, so maybe it's a little bit more of an extreme example there. But I bet you Mac Jones would have looked a lot better if Josh McDaniels was still the OC. So maybe they can patch up the offensive line. Some of that money saved from a Derek Carr contract to a rookie quarterback contract. Maybe that goes to the offensive line. But if they can get an okay O-line situation, he's got Devontae Adams, he's got Hunter Renfrow, he's got Darren Waller, Mac Hollins with a breakout year. This could be a situation that Stroud could step into and actually be okay. But hopefully he can still be able to add that off-script ability that we saw in the college football playoff. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons, Tyree Wilson. I think this is a slam dunk, especially now that Jared Verse is going back to school. I mean, what a bomb that was to drop. Really surprised by that news. He was shaping up to be edge 2, maybe probably edge 3 for me, right behind Miles Murphy. But it was going to be close between Murphy and Verse. But now that he's gone, I mean, Tyree Wilson, the Falcons, makes a ton of sense. You have Arnold Ebiketie as the speed, finesse, freaky athlete on one side, and Tyree Wilson's a different type of freaky athlete at 6'6", 280, long arms, can win with the bull. I just think that gives you a nice balance of different pass rush skill sets from one end to the other. And you still have D'Angelo Malone, who can just kind of settle into a DPR role, day 3 pick for a reason. A good one, though. I think they got good value there, not to knock Malone. But then he kind of becomes this pass rush only type of guy, and I think that really speaks to his skill set and also a little bit smaller of a prospect. I think that works out to hide some of his strengths as well. So we love this pick. I mean, I don't know if Tyree Wilson's really going to hit the ground running, so it might still be a year or 2 before Atlanta really sees the results of this selection. But be patient. I think Tyree Wilson has a ton that you can work with. Then we get to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm not surprised by this. Anthony Richardson. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to have 3 quarterbacks go in the top, 7, I think this leaves the Panthers with no choice, right? I think Carolina's the team to move up to get the number 1. If I had to make, if someone put a gun to my head right now and told me to make a decision, I'd say Carolina. But in this situation, Anthony Richardson comes to you, and whoever that head coach is, especially if it's Ken Dorsey, that becomes really interesting, because this is, the QB coach for Josh Allen who gets to work with Anthony Richardson. Think about how many people have said, oh, Brian Daboll, man, if the Giants could get Anthony Richardson, that'd be awesome. Well, guess what? Anthony Richardson ain't staying on the board till the Giants pick. Unless they move up, he ain't going to be a Giant next year. So you get him with, again, we'll see who this head coach for Carolina is, but I've heard, obviously the Jim Harbaugh reports, and then Jim Caldwell potentially in the mix. That could be another fun pairing. Caldwell, a former offensive coordinator and offensive-minded head coach, working with Anthony Richardson. That could be cool. But nonetheless, I think there's still a lot to be worked out in that whole head coaching process for Carolina. But yeah, Anthony Richardson, whoever that head coach is, I think this has got to be the pick here, because there's not a whole lot of, there's holes in that roster, but it's not as in dire state as like in Arizona, who's just a few picks in front of them, right? Like, they got wide receiver talent, emerging offensive line, defensive players that can stay in place through a rebuild because they're young and they're talented and they've shown a lot. And I think, if quarterback falls your lap here at 9, that's got to be the pick. Next up, Philadelphia Eagles, by virtue of the Saints trade up last year. And Brian Branch. I mean, to me, and Renner even puts it in here, this is your perfect Chauncey Gardner-Johnson replacement. We'll see how that contract plays out. If they do sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, then this could go cornerback depth. This could become edge depth. I know Eagles fans don't want to hear this, but don't pass up on Bijan here. Or not pass up, but don't think that Bijan's automatically out of the running. I know Howie Roseman is really staunch in position value, and that's part of the reason I love him as a general manager and as an exec. But this is free money, right? Like this is the Saints pick. You still got years later. So adding a Bijan could certainly be in the cards here as well. So I didn't word that all perfectly, but edge, corner, or Bijan, I think all are in play here. And I think if you don't re-sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson or just want a cheaper version of that, Brian Branch is a great addition. A guy with a ton of play speed, has played at a ton of different positions, and willing to make a tackle at the line of scrimmage, a hard hitter, but also just really sticking coverage, really sound in zone coverage at that too. So you do a lot of different things for Brian Branch. Would love to see the Eagles add him into that middle of the defense. Then we get to the Titans. I've been saying this all year long. I think it was really put on display on Saturday against the Jags. Dennis Daly is probably the worst starting tackle that I got to see. Now, granted, there were tackles who had to step in for a play or two, or maybe for half a game or something like that. Dennis Daly was starting for pretty much all year for Tennessee, and it was rough from start to finish. So getting in a Paris Johnson Jr. I think makes a ton of sense, and to me he's still OT1. So would love that addition. It's a pick I've made plenty of times. Then we get to the Texans, Quentin Johnston, and I mean hot take alert, I guess. So this is probably going to piss people off, but Will Levis, Quentin Johnston. If those guys hit their ceiling, that's going to be Mahomes, Tyreek Hill light. Now, granted, very different players, right? Like, there's a lot of work to be done with Levis, and I'm not saying he's Patrick Mahomes, so don't take this as me saying he's going to be the next Patrick Mahomes. And Quentin Johnston's 6'4", Tyreek Hill's not even 6 foot. Like, again, different body types. And Tyreek ran in the 4.2s. Johnston's going to be a high 4.3, low 4.4 guy. But you add in his strides and his downfield ability. I mean, did you see him against Michigan? He I don't want to say he took that game over, but he's a big reason TCU held on late in that game. So would love to see this type of pairing with Levis's big arm and Johnson's deep speed, but also great body control. You can win at the catch point. I mean, that pairing makes a ton of sense, but also for a rookie quarterback, Quentin Johnston might be one of the best, if not the best, satellite player. Get the ball to him in space and let him work as a yards after the catch machine, because this dude is slippery as it comes, especially for 6'4", 215, or whatever he'll officially weigh in at. So would love to see this. And this, if this were how it played out, Levis and Johnson, the fact that they would get Johnston would give me that much more confidence in Levis being able to work out, because that wide receiver room is going to need some fixing, especially considering I do expect to see a Brandon Cooks trade at some point this offseason. The Jets land Peter Skoronski. So it's interesting. I don't know if Renner has Paris Johnson Jr. over Skoronski on his draft board, but that's how it played out here in this mock, and I think this works out well for the Jets, wrong New York team. And this gives you a ton of different options for how you want to play moving forward, because you already drafted this guard tackle hybrid with Elijah Vera Tucker, and when we got to see him at tackle, he looked pretty good, actually. He looked pretty solid. So add another guy like that in the mix. So if you move on from a George Fant, not a problem. We have a contingency plan in place. Or if you decide to trade Mekhi Becton and keep George Fant, okay, cool. There's a plan in place. There's a way to work through that. Dwayne Brown might not be back, right? Like, that was kind of structured as a one-year deal. So I think this draft pick just kind of gives you that flexibility to handle that situation, however best suited in the eyes of Joe Douglas, right? So also, if you're getting into a pinch where, you know, some injuries happening, you need to play Elijah Vera Tucker at tackle, or you need to play Peter Skronsky at tackle, you totally can. Or Peter Skronsky might just be starting to tackle as is. So again, flexibility, versatility, things that I really like in an offensive lineman, and I think this really just kind of gives the Jets that much more wiggle room just in case offseason doesn't go right, or if there are future injuries. I really like this fit here at 13. Then we get to the New England Patriots, and wow, speaking of fits I like, yeah, that's a hot one. Devon Witherspoon, or Devin Witherspoon, excuse me, to the Patriots. I mean, he's probably the best man coverage corner. I mean, I know traits-wise, we'll look at Christian Gonzalez, we'll look at Joey Porter Jr., we'll look at Keely Ringo, but I mean, look at the production. And hey, Devin Witherspoon, 6'1", 180. He ain't small. He may not be as big as Christian Gonzalez or Ringo or Porter, but he ain't little. And 1 yard allowed in press coverage all year long at Illinois. Tell me that's not a stat Bill Belichick saying, oh, you know, that's what I want. Bad Bill Belichick impression there, but that screams to me a type of dude that will fit that defense, and a guy that Bill Belichick will hammer and pound the table for. So I could totally see this happening. And I think 14, that's a solid place to land Devon Witherspoon. Then we get the Packers at 15, Michael Mayer. I think you're going to continue to see a ton of this throughout the offseason. Sorry, Packers fans, your mock draft season is going to be kind of boring because you're going to see a whole lot of this. But I think the fit makes a ton of sense. We'll see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But no matter who's under center, Dobbs, Watson, emerging wide receivers, let's add an emerging tight end in the mix. And now you got 3 legitimate weapons to build that core around. Maybe it's with Rodgers and Randall Cobb coming back, and all of a sudden that offense is going to hopefully be able to carry its late season momentum into next year. Or if it's Jordan Love, you give him a stable ground to basically have a chance. You're giving him 3 decent options and 3 young options that may, hey, if it all works out, give the Packers and its fan base a ton to be excited about moving forward. So I like the Michael Mayer fit. Been doing it a ton myself, so I like it from that perspective as well. Then we get to the Washington Commanders. Christian Gonzalez, depending on who you talk to, potentially someone CB1, and I totally understand why. 6'2", running the 4.3s. Very fluid when moving, and great ability to turn his hips and, you know, make a play on the ball too. So a guy that big just should not be able to move that smooth. And there's going to be someone I say that about later on. I would assume, considering Renner is a pretty big fan of that prospect. We'll see. He's a wide receiver, but that guy moves super fluid, but he's like 5'10", 170, 175 pounds. Gonzalez does it at 6'2" and nearly 200 pounds. So really impressive there. And then for Washington, who's that, you know, shutdown corner of the future? I've been optimistic about Benjamin St-Juste. I think he's put some good games on his tape this year. So pairing up Gonzalez with St-Juste could be a really fun pairing. It would give you 2 corners at 6'2" with that pass rush in Washington. That defense goes from already pretty good to potentially really scary to face week in and week out. Next up, Pittsburgh Steelers at 17, Cam Smith. Would love this pick as a Steelers fan. To me, it's offensive tackle or corner. That's got to be the direction they go. Cam Smith, yeah, maybe a little handsy, a little bit more penalties put on his film, but I think a guy who has the potential to be, you know, a man press type, but also has the ability to play off coverage. So no matter what Pittsburgh wants to do moving forward, whatever Terrell Austin wants to do as the DC, I think Cam Smith can fit into whatever that is. So the ability to play in man and zone, play press, play off, you know, I think it's all there. And I think he's got some traits that he's not quite J.C. Horn. I don't think he'll be a top 10 pick, but he's got a lot to work with. And I think he's a solid athlete, certainly worthy of being a first rounder. Next up, Detroit Lions, Bijan Robinson. This is now 2 straight mock draft reactions where Bijan's gone to Detroit. Now, I understand part of it is like a guy who puts out mock drafts on his own channel. It's just hard to, like, where's Bijan going to go? And that's why I'm like, hey, don't forget about Philadelphia at 10, because that totally, to me, makes sense. Despite Howie Roseman being a guy who doesn't draft linebackers, right? I get it. He doesn't draft safeties in the first round. He might not draft a running back. I understand, but I think it's still there. But for Detroit, man, if they drafted Bijan, then, like, my question is, like, what are you doing with Jamal Williams, who just scored 17 touchdowns for you? What are you doing with DeAndre Swift? Is he going to be on his way out? So there'd be some questions I would need answers to, but on top of that, like, the defense, like, if you're not going to take a quarterback, I don't want you drafting offense. That sounds crazy, but, like, the offensive line's in place. I like the running back duo. I think the wide receivers, maybe you could find a DJ Chark replacement, but with how bad that defense is, if that's going to be your reason you don't draft a quarterback, then don't draft a quarterback and focus on your defense, right? So I understand you got to find a place for Bijan, but if they're not going to go quarterback, I'd like to see the Lions double up on the defensive side of the ball. Corner, we gave him Brian Brzee earlier, but even Trenton Simpson here at linebacker I think would be an intriguing fit. So not crazy about the Bijan move there from Renner. 19, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Nolan Smith. I think a guy who's still going to go in the first round despite his injuries, but high-level run defender, high-level athlete, still some work to be done as a pass rusher, but I think this guy screams games, and also team captain, right? I think this guy's just screamed NFL project that teams, coaches, front offices want to take a chance on, right? Like some projects and some prospects that come with a lot of work, come with a lot of baggage, or there's not a whole lot of tape, or they come from a small school. Nolan Smith is playing for the best defense in the country. You saw some strides made in the right direction this year. Again, a team captain. Like, to me, he strikes me as the person that an NFL team is like, it's not all there yet, but I can get him there, or I'll be able to make it happen. So I totally can see that happening. And for Tampa Bay, it's like, hey, is Shaq Barrett going to be able to play more than next year, right? Like, I mean, pretty big injury this year. Who knows how much gas he's got left in the tank? And potentially it could be Nolan Smith and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka as your edge duo of the future. But even in the meantime, like if it's Shaq Barrett, I've been saying for 2 years now that Tampa needs a third pass rusher. So while Nolan Smith's a project, he can kind of still be that, that work in progress, but he can still serve as that third edge rusher for the team that I've been saying for a while now they desperately need. So I like that pick a ton. Then Seattle Seahawks take Keely Ringo. Again, I think this makes a ton of sense. I really love going defensive line and corner for Seattle, but I'm starting to have that Ika pick grow on me right here at 20. But if they got Keely Ringo, I mean, this guy just feels like a Seattle corner, 6'2", long arms. Again, he's going to run in the 4.3s. Very, similar to Christian Gonzalez. And when you talk about the traits and the boxes you can check with these guys, but pairing him up with Tariq Woolen, you'd have two guys with pterodactyl wings for arms, 6'2" plus in height, and also blazing fast. That could be scary. And then we're also talking about a defense that, added a top tier player in this draft in Miles Murphy at pick number 5. So yeah, I'd be pretty excited. I'm a Seattle fan. Love this pick here a ton. I've been doing it a ton myself, edge, corner. So I would love if this happened for the Seahawks. Next up, the Jags. Osiris Torrance, I think this makes a ton of sense. Potential left guard of the future. And put them next to Cam Robinson, who got the extension last offseason. Make this a ton. It's not flashy, right? Like, I'd like to see this team add another corner. Maybe they could be the team that gets Michael Mayer if he falls here. Another corner could certainly be in the cards, but interior offensive line, corner, I think strike me as the biggest needs for this team. So don't hate them going Osiris Torrance. To me, the best guard in the draft class. Next, New York Giants. I'm starting to see this a ton. Jordan Addison at 23, and I love it. I am totally here for it. I also like if Jordan Addison potentially fell one pick lower to the Baltimore Ravens. That would be really spicy as well. But here for the Giants, a guy who could potentially be their wide receiver 1. And I just did my playoff predictions, and the reason I have them losing the Vikings is you just compare the firepower on the outside. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Those are guys that KJ Osborne's playing good football. Those are guys who can win you a game on the outside. Whereas the Giants, it's like you're just kind of making do with Hodgins and Richie James, and Kenny Golladay has that great catch, but it's week 18. Why is Kenny Golladay playing week 18 when the rest of the starters aren't, right? Like, that speaks to how rough it's been, and that signing overall has been. But yeah, I think they just need a difference maker there on the outside, and if they're going to roll it back with Daniel Jones, this type of pick will only make them that much better. We get to the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, this is another one I'm not really crazy fond of. Look, I know the Ravens love their tight ends, and it's so easy to be like, hey, well, Darnell Washington and the Ravens make a ton of sense. Look, there's not a lot of guys who move like Darnell Washington at 6'7" and 260 pounds. It kind of defies all ways of logical thinking. But he's also a fantastic blocker off of that. So I get he checks a lot of boxes. But did this team not just draft Isaiah Likely? And I know Likely doesn't bring a whole lot of blocking value unless you put him in motion before that. And maybe he could play the slot, but Baltimore also in 2021, third lowest percentage of 3 receiver sets. So is that really even a role in this offense? So I get Darnell Washington's probably going to be an early second round, late first round type of player for a lot of people. And I think that's ultimately where he'll get drafted. But man, just if you're the Ravens, just draft a wide receiver at this point, add a Zay Flowers. I think that, speaking of Zay Flowers, not too far removed, we'll be talking about him. So not crazy about this pick, but I could still understand it checks a lot of boxes for the Ravens. Well, without further ado, let's not belabor the point. Let's go ahead and talk about the Los Angeles Chargers drafting Zay Flowers. This is a little bit of a spoiler alert. This will definitely be the same selection I make in my next mock draft. I just think, again, this is the exact type of wide receiver the Chargers are missing from that offense, the deep speed, but also a guy who can be a satellite, put him in space. He's small, but he just moves at the speed of light. It really is crazy. But I think he's polished up his route running, especially deep down the field. So getting a guy who can be that deep route running threat, push safeties back maybe 5 yards, really opens it up for Keenan Allen, Mike Williams that much more, and even Austin Eckler for that matter, and Gerald Everett furthermore. So, really love this addition. This is the type of wide receiver I've been looking for, but also has the flexibility playing inside and out, right? Like you look at a Josh Downs maybe, That guy, to me, is probably going to be slot only, and that's where Keenan Allen has a ton of his production. He can play on the outside, but given that he's not the fleetest of foot, I think the slot makes the most sense, and Zay Flowers, I think, has what it takes to be able to play on the outside. He's a little small, so we'll have to see how he handles. I think he's going to the Senior Bowl. If not that, he's going to the Shrine Bowl, so he'll be at one of these, senior circuits. We'll get to see some one-on-one reps and how he handles specifically press coverage. That'll be the break or break if he plays inside, out, or can he do both, or is it just one or the other? So really excited to see what his future holds throughout this draft cycle, and I think he'd be a great fit for the Chargers. Next up, Dallas Cowboys. So, I guess Renner, like a lot of people, they're switching over to Drew Sanders being the top off-ball linebacker instead of Trenton Simpson. I think I'm still holding out on Simpson right now. We'll have to wait and see. But Sanders, 5-star recruit, Alabama transfer, and all athlete, and a guy who flies all over the field. So, for a Dallas team that has Anthony Barr on a one-year deal, has Leighton Vander Esch coming back on a one-year deal, this guy totally makes sense to be the dude there in the middle. And you can still play Micah Parsons off ball, but I think drafting a Drew Sanders just allows you to play that much more Micah Parsons at edge, which I think that's ultimately the best place for him to play. And I think that's where in the defense is at its best, when he's on the D-line, trying to get to the quarterback and just being an absolute stud. So, paired up with Tank Lawrence and all the other guys, and especially on those stunts and twists, he's such a good athlete. He's so hard to keep up with, especially when he's rushing to the interior. Guards do not stand a chance against Parsons. So I think Drew Sanders is a worthy pick. I think I'd lean Simpson here, but if this is the type of selection that gets me more Micah Parsons on the edge, I am all for it. Next up at 27, Anton Harrison to the Bengals. I think this totally makes sense. It'd be interesting to see, is this with the move in mind of Jonah Williams playing left guard, who, hey, when he came out as a draft prospect, there was guard tackle flexibility. And you look at that left guard spot, it's been problematic for Cincinnati. So maybe you can draft an Anton Harrison, who's played over 1,000 snaps at Oklahoma, started as a true freshman, and play him at left tackle, move Williams into guard, or is this your potential Lyle Collins long-term replacement at right tackle? Either way you spin it, I'm cool with this pick. I like this selection. It's also a Bengals team that doesn't have a whole lot of holes in their roster. Corner and edge are areas I go a lot, but if they go back to the offensive line, I will not complain about that, because the number one priority for this franchise is keep Joe Burrow healthy, keep him upright, and keep Jamar Chase on the field, so that way Joe Burrow can hit Jamar Chase for big plays, right? So love this selection because it's just kind of a move to solidify that type of identity. Then we get to the Vikings. Tanner McKee, I did not see this one coming. So 5 QBs in the first round, and I love Tanner McKee. I don't know if I'm quite as big of a McKee guy as Renner is here. I had him going early second round, and part of the reason I still believe in him, and I know this is a big reason why Renner still is a big Tanner McKee believer, his situation at Stanford was just abhorrent. Bad offensive line, receivers who couldn't get open, and an offensive scheme that was not doing any favors for him. But highest graded quarterback in PFF's data, so take that for how you feel about them. But highest graded throws into tight windows, high percentage of throws going into tight windows of any of the quarterbacks in this class. So he's had to unfortunately live his life at Stanford making tight window throws, and he's been pretty good at it because of it. So man, if he goes to the Vikings, this is also a situation where it's like, even if you don't think McKee is ready right away, you get another year of Kirk Cousins. And honestly, their profiles can be kind of similar, right? Like, I think McKee probably has a little bit more arm strength than Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins has got a solid arm, and accuracy obviously there. Not necessarily the most fleet of foot. I think McKee has a little bit more mobility, but it's really just kind of a, oh man, no one's open, tuck and run, get 5 type of mobility we're talking about here. That's the state of his athletic ability at the quarterback spot. But yeah, I would be all for this selection. And granted, you're going to take this quarterback at the opportunity cost of getting a corner, which they need, some edge depth, which they need, an off-ball linebacker, which they need. Basically, just about anything on the defensive side of the ball they could use. So I love kind of the idea of this, but it does sacrifice potential upgrades for here and now for Minnesota. But hey, if they do this could long-term be the best decision they could make at the same time, right? Like, draft that quarterback, sits for a year, you have a plan in place to replace Kirk Cousins and get cheaper at the position, which then in turn, just like we were talking about the Raiders earlier on, could become money that goes to the defense. So hey, I don't hate this whatsoever. At 29, Joey Porter Jr. I had kind of forgotten about him, but yeah, he falls down the board hard here and goes to 29. And oh my God, Pat Surtain, a top 5 corner in the league, in my opinion, paired up with Joey Porter Jr., who, hey, spoiler alert, going to be my number 1 corner once I get there, unless, I have a drastic change of feelings. But I'm feeling like Joey Porter Jr. is going to be my number 1 corner. That secondary with Justin Simmons is going to be crazy. So I am all for this. If he falls this far, I would love it. And for the Broncos, it's like right tackle, you could use some edge depth, and a number 2 corner, and maybe a strong safety to potentially replace Kareem Jackson. Those are the things that immediately stand out. because I mean you can't get rid of Russell Wilson, and you got to hire a good head coach, but that doesn't play into the draft here. So if they got Joey Porter Jr. fall into their lap at 29, that would be a steal in my opinion. Bills take Trenton Simpson. Yeah, this could make sense too, especially considering Tremaine Edmonds about to fetch a bag, and that's a guy who, even going back before this season, he's drafted at 18. He's going into year 5, but he's only going to be. That means he's only going to be 23 and then 24 at the time of the free agency period, and when he's potentially going to sign that contract. Just like the NBA, sometimes when you're drafted at 18 and start playing professional sports, it takes a little bit longer than if you were 20, 21 and then trying to get the hang of it. So. Actually, he might have been 19 when he was drafted, and then now he's going to be 24 as free agent. So apologies if I'm slightly off there, but nonetheless, you get my point. So it took a little bit, but now Tremaine Edmonds, I think, is really starting to hit his stride and start to become a really solid football. I think the future, the next 4 to 5 years are still, the best of his football. So if they can't keep him around because he gets too big of a contract, Trenton Simpson to me makes a ton of sense as a replacement, and a lot of the similar skill sets, a true safety skill set with the linebacker body. Yeah, I would love this, and a guy who could defend the slot, be great in zone coverage, can stop the run. I mean, yeah, there's not a lot that I don't think Trenton Simpson can do. So to me, it makes a ton of sense as a potential replacement for Tremaine Edmonds. Looks like we got 2 more picks to talk about here. Kansas City Chiefs take Luke Musgrave. I mean, Travis Kelce can't play forever, but also just the idea of this team being able to go, hey, we can go three wide receivers, and you're kind of worried about all 3 with where Pat Mahomes might be able to put the football. But we can also go under center and go 2 tight end and really give you fits, because we have a good offensive line who can run the ball well, but the play action game off of it is not only hard to defend because our wide receivers are solid and Pat Mahomes can get just about anybody open, but now you got to defend Travis Kelce and a Luke Musgrave, who really good athlete, got hurt early on this year at Oregon State, but soft hands, and given how good of an athlete he is, I think maybe that's part of why his routes tend to be a little bit more curvy, as opposed to those, hard cuts and whatnot that get him open. But nonetheless, if you're a good athlete running away from a linebacker, the athleticism typically will do the job. That can make that offense that much scarier. So this whole time, be kind of thinking, edge, corner, and maybe wide receiver here for the Chiefs. Tight end, I don't hate that much. It's a little off the wall, but I don't hate it whatsoever. And then we get to pick number 32. This is the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, he has 32 because he had the Dolphins in here. Okay, sorry for my confusion there. But Jackson Smith and Jigwell, this would be a fun fit. You have speedy Batman, Quez Watkins as that third wide receiver, but JSN, kind of the complete opposite, right, where he doesn't have that deep end speed, but does just about everything else at a higher level than Quez Watkins. Better route runner, this is hard to speculate and measure, but higher football IQ, can sit and find those soft spots in the zone, really good hands. This could be, those 2 guys could basically alternate snaps in the slot, at least as JSN's rookie year plays out. And it just comes down to, hey, do we need the burner, or do we need the guy who could potentially work the underneath stuff and find a soft spot? What does the situation dictate here? So I would like that addition. And it's just more offensive firepower. We've seen this offense be juggernauts at times. And if you're going to add JSN in the mix right here at 32, late first round, early second, I think that's a nice value for JSN. And I think you just make that offense that much better. So keep pouring points on the board, right? That's how you win games. So that's going to do it for my reaction to Mike Renner's latest NFL mock draft. I'll scroll through so you can see it one final time, but let me know what you think about this mock down below in the comment section. Who goes too high? Who falls too low? Do you like the fits? Do you like the trade for the number 1 overall pick? Do you think the Colts end up getting that selection? I'd love to have your thoughts down below in the comment section. I love talking football with you all, so let me hear your takes in the comment section. That's going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button. It helped me out a ton. If you're new around here and want to see more football content in your life, just hit that subscribe button. That is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.